Okay, so I'm here to present Dronebrygg, which many of you may or may not know about from D.O.R. It's a brewery, maybe you know it's a brewery underneath us almost now, that provides beer for the bar here at Kunstnernes Hus. I'm going to take you through some things that we've been doing for some years, and also a little bit about our interest in this product that is beer. So first of all, Dronebrygg is 5 people: Daniel Teigen, Marius, Notvik, Steinar Braa, Andreas, Hegermann, Riis, and me. And it was started in the 90s by Daniel Teigen and Steinar Braa, and then came sort of to its form in 2011. Not in the 90s, in the zeros. So, and of course, it's strictly forbidden with advertisement here, so I'm not maybe allowed to talk about this at all in front of you. And specifically not allowed to tell you how good the beer is. So you have to try that for yourself. I see some of you guys drinking it. I'm not allowed to say anything else than for almost nothing, and maybe maybe I can't say how good it is, and maybe it's not allowed to say it's the best beer in the world. But we're gonna go as far back as you can on this planet to start with. We're going to talk a little bit about what's called the simology, which is the knowledge of things that ferment. This starts so this starts in a couple of billion years after the existence of the planet Earth, where it was way too hot for anything to live, and then it cooled down a little bit, still way too hot for anything to live as we know it, but then some forms of single cell bacteria came about. So they stood for the first 2 billion years of life on Earth. This is what's called the primordial soup. It's a theory about how everything grew out of this sort of soup that was bacteria. And they finally, after 2 billion years, managed to in this anaerobic atmosphere, no air at all, so they managed to live without existence of oxygen, which they sort of still do now. Very good quality to have. And they, after a while, they were able to create this new. They don't know how. It's very impossible to know how. They were able to create the first eukaryote, which is this is a bacteria. Okay, there's longer than this one. And they were able to create this first eukaryote cell, which has a membrane and protein, which is now the standard for most cells. So this is the first organism that, after millions of years, billions of years, evolved into plants and other things such as dogs and cars and not cars. So then that's existent. That's when the protein came out. I guess before I start talking about the fermentation, I can also say it's everywhere. So it's happening right now in your blood cells, in your cells, and all around your body, and different places on your body, especially. I'll come back to that. So it's pretty much taken over everything. It used to be the only living thing on Earth, and you can say that everything is sort of evolved out of these bacteria, which also, so bacteria and yeast are different entities. They are two different categories, but they have a lot of things in common, and they also do a lot of work on the actual product that we're going to talk about today, beer. Okay, so then we fast forward a little bit from this primordial soup to around 80 million years ago, when the Earth was still pretty unrecognizable. I mean, the continents were where they should be, but a lot of things were covered in water. This was when the dinosaurs were here, and they at this hour, the new invention came about, which was fruit. This is a fruit. So fruit came. Before that, everything that every plant had seeds to spread and to give birth to new plants. But then all of a sudden the Earth figured out how to make plants that had delicious packages with the seeds in them. What was the plan for the fruit? Was for the animals to eat the fruit, and then they would walk different places, and then the seeds would go through them, and then out to a place where it also had the fertilizer in the whole plant. It was a perfect place for a new plant to grow up. So these were fruit, but so fruit is made out of a very simple carbohydrate, which is fructose. It's a very simple little thing, it's like this almost. And glucose, so different kinds of sugars this is made out of. And then the bacteria and the yeast immediately, because they have been around for a lot more, they're very old, so they know their way around this ancient Earth, and they attack this immediately. So then gave birth to a new way of, but that gave birth to a process called fermentation, which is so fermentation is anaerobic metabolism. It's the transformation of fructose or glucose or any kind of sugar into energy, or into specifically alcohol and gas. Into this situation came the Saccharomyces, which is the sugar fungus. And this is what's gonna save the human race, and also what's gonna get you drunk today and tomorrow and last night. And that what happens when this fruit becomes older and the sugars break down. The Saccharomyces attack it and makes alcohol and gas, CO2. And the good thing about what happens here also is that the animals, they don't really smell fruit that well, but because of the alcohol creating these esters, which is esters are esters is a chemical compound with fatty acid and oil and form pheromones connected into this cell, or this combination chemical compound, and this smells much more than just a regular fruit would smell. So not only was this now alcoholic, but about a fruit can become approximately 4% in alcohol, which is a very, alcohol is a very energy-rich substance. You can drive a car on it, and you can get drunk on it. And so this was packed full of already fermented sugars, which is so much easier for our body to digest. So this was pure energy. And also it smelled from a further distance, so the animals that could smell, the animals that got the good nose for smelling alcohol was the ones that would survive. And now the dinosaurs are gone, by the way. So not only is it very rich in the energy, but it's the reason why it's there. It's because the Saccharomyces is a very smart fungus. In just a matter of 3 or 4 hours, it creates this percentage. And this percentage is enough to repel almost every other bacteria. So even though it's on the ground, even though different animals eat it with different kind of bacteria in their mouth and beaks and noses, they won't survive. So it's a safe place. Also, there's other things that's inside that sort of work together with the alcohol and the Saccharomyces to create a lower pH. So it makes for a very safe fruit to eat. And animals love alcohol. If you have there's research in laboratories where they create a free bar, and they see which animal drinks the most. And if you give free bar to a group of chimps, they will maintain a constant buzz. They won't drink too much, so they will be drunk all the time, just to maintain it forever. If you give it to bats, they drink till they die. If you give it to if you give to rats, that's the most interesting. Rats, they drink the same exact way as humans. So they have an aperitif, they eat a little bit before they eat, and then they have a nightcap, and then every 3 or 4 days, and they get really drunk, they party, and then they drink a little bit to cure the hangover, and then they just keep going. So this is a video of animals being drunk. elephants has an enormous amount, a ridiculous amount of steroids. Recognizable behavior. There you go. So, and the same goes for humans, even though, so what happens in the human body when it consumes alcohol is this. It's the binding of the coenzyme NAD+, and then it goes on. So in the end of the process of metabolizing and drinking alcohol, you release this aldehyde, and this is the exact opposite of what is Saccharomyces does. So the Saccharomyces starts with aldehyde and then goes the other way. So we just reverse the whole process of the sugar. And in our liver, there is protein or enzyme for something called alcohol dehydrogenase, which is what we saw in the last picture. And this is what it looks like in the human. This is the ADH5. This is our model. The horse has this one, and the horse cannot drink as much as the human because of this. And this is our body being evolving into much better vessel for breaking down alcohol than the animals because of our long history with this product. So 10%, actually 10% of our liver function is dedicated to breaking down alcohol. Okay. So now we're going to go to fermentation. Like I said, fermentation happens in our body, it happens in nature, it happens everywhere. It happens, you can say it's co-evolved with our body. So there's no way of saying that our body is evolved without the bacteria and the yeast. So we ferment from the second we're born. Bacteria attacks the baby and comes into our stomach through our first sip of milk. And so the same as just to sort of get the notion of how big fermentation is. It's when you run, just regularly running, you will be a little sore maybe, but if you really have to run, the body is made so that the blood can ferment the sugars in the glucose in our blood to create energy in the muscle. So that feels that's the feeling you get when you have melkesyre in your muscles. So lactic acid is the byproduct, which you feel as a stiffener or as a stiffness or soreness when you're lifting those weights. So that's fermenting. We have 1.2 kilos of bacteria and yeast in our body. Kilos, not percent. Which adds up to about 100 trillion cells. And they then outnumber our regular cells by 1 to 10. So there's more cells, that's bacteria and yeast in our body than there are DNA cells. And also we have a couple of grams of yeast and bacteria on our body. Functions so the immune system is in the stomach, of course, with this bacteria. They take care of the whole immune system for us. And they also digest most of our food. So we wouldn't be able to digest food without those. And the skin has different colonies. So there's civilizations of yeast and fungus and bacteria on different parts of your body. So say your feet has a different kind of very different civilization, and just in your mouth there's 700 different kinds of bacteria and yeast. And in the human vagina there's indigenous lactobacilli that creates this very special pH immune system. And that's a very indigenous one. And then so on our feet there's bacteria that is the exact same as the bacteria you find in a mature or rotten cheese. So Parmesan has the same. Most of the taste there comes from bacteria that is the same as in our in the magesekk. It's a very acidic bacteria. So that's maybe not so delicate to think about, but it's all just part of the enormous vast universe of the bacteria and the yeast, which if it would not be there, nothing would decompose. So everything that it has existed would still be here. So that would suck. So fermentation is not only coffee, chocolate, tea, yogurt, which is the same as the bacteria or the yeast that eats the blood. Salami, wine, beer, sauerkraut, soy sauce, hot sauce. It's just going on everywhere. But as humans, we only sort of figured out what to do with it in the Neolithic period, which is around 9,500 years. That's when we still barely managed to make things out of stone. We didn't figure it out because it was already there. It happened just everywhere, and we drank it and we felt good. And it's about 5,000 years before Christ where they have found writings on beer, ancient Egypt. And then comes the species which is the sort of the world dominant species of the Saccharomyces, which is the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is the beer version of the Saccharomyces. And because we made beer for so long, this is now the superior yeast almost everywhere. That means in nature as well. They hitched a ride on us, or we hitched a ride on them, and they now dominate the world. And this little thing is it's a miniature, very tiny little disc, and it's very soft and slimy. This just is an integral part of our culture worldwide. Okay, that's a little bit about the yeasts, and then so just to say like how worldwide these different kinds of beer yeasts are. When they start figuring out how to make pils, lager, which is a kind of beer that ferments in a colder setting, most beer yeast would die, and they figured this out in Bavaria. And they really just in the 1700s they had it sort of figured out. They had been drinking versions of it for 100 or 200 years before. But when they now look at the Bavarian yeast strain, they find that it's a strain that came from Patagonia. So through Columbus and things going back and forth, that's how they managed really to make lager beer in Germany. And also byproducts of beers culturally is the fridge. In the 1881 they figured out how to make a fridge. And that was because they wanted to make beer all year. And this is of course built on the findings of Louis Pasteur, who in 1850 wanted to know why beer spoils, and then looked at it through a microscope and saw that not only was the yeast cells, but there was some of these guys, which he then figured out was bacteria. So after realizing that the bacteria was the one that spoiled the beer, they then just looked over at humans and saw that maybe that was the case for deaths or diseases. So you can say that maybe not only the fridge, but the modern medicine and many other things were also the factory. The factory of beer making started 10 years prior to Henry Ford and his car making industry. And it's still a huge industry today. So today it makes the yearly quantity of beer made now is 100 and something billion liters, which if you put all of it together, it's 510 meters cube. 510 meters cube. Lovely beer. Okay, so this is the background of maybe a little bit why we are so fascinated as artists with this with the beer. So in 2011, Daniel Teigen had a show in Bucharest where we made 350 liters of beer for everyone to enjoy and to sort of have that become an atmosphere in the exhibition, which sort of was part of the exhibition, and an atmosphere it became. So these are some of the posters from that exhibition, which is the actual beer that we made, and it's Daniel Teigen's artwork, which is maybe an aesthetic extended version of the fermentation. And this was the room looked like. There was different bottles, sculptural bottles, and this bar in the middle. people serve themselves. And then speaking of the human body as a vessel for fermentation, this was a beer we made, a project we did in Brussels at D.O.R, where we asked the gallerists, Steinar Dahl and Steinar Braa to sit in this tub through the whole evening, drinking beer. And then at the end of the evening, we took 50 liters out and made a 50-liter batch of beer with the same water. And then this water was transferred downstairs to a cool ship, which is an open container where every fungus and bacteria in the air finds this sugary wort and then starts fermenting. So this exhibition was called a negative spontaneous fermented portrait, and it was sort of the Rachel Whitbread negative space around these bodies that became this beer. So and we sat there for 6 months, where in this oak barrel you have to refill with beer every now and then because it evaporates. So every time they had openings, they would pour some beer from the opening inside this. So it sort of grew with the openings. And then we put them in bottles, which then Daniel Teigen engraved. So we have 500 of those, I think, or something, which is very drinkable, very good, but maybe more a sculpture than a party. And then we did the project in Bergen Kunsthall. We were invited to be part of the after school special, where we decided we wanted to make a beer that was part Bergen Hansa and part Freak beer, which was Red Bull. So we made a very simple Hansa recipe, and then we built all the yeast up from 2 billion cells to 10 billion cells in a pool of Red Bull. And this tasted okay, but since it was free, a lot of people liked it. So what we decided to do was to have it hang in the ceiling, in the entrance, and then have this pile of cups next to it, plastic cups with Hansa logo. But every one of the cups had a pinhole in it, tiny pinhole. So if you filled it with beer, you wouldn't really recognize it, but they would drip. So everywhere people went, there would be like drips. And so if people gathered in groups and talked, it would be like pools of beer underneath them. And so after a while, they figured it out, and then they would walk around with like a finger holding it. So they became sort of a performance in themselves. And then the latest project was a project we did in Konkret, Vestfossen, where we try to make this, we aim to create this cesspool, or this, we aim to create an enormous amount of beer flies. So this is 750 kilos of yeast on the floor. And in the back end there's some fruit, which in their sugary beaks, or their coating, they have eggs, and most of the time they have eggs with the fruit fly, and also 2 glasses of half-drunk red wines, the things you don't want to leave on your kitchen counter. So this would stand there for a month, where in the end this pile became just a flat surface that was like trying to dig up fruit flies, but mostly just paint on the wall peeling off because of both the humidity and the yeast attacking. So if anyone wants to, if anyone of you guys run a gallery and wants Dronebrygg to know where to find us. That's the latest project, and as of now we run this brewery in the basement where we can both learn the profession and experiment. So we're going to make a lot of experimental beer and also very safe beer. Everything's safe. Everything's safe. And I can make a tiny little beer for you guys right now. This little sugar. You water it down. And then you take some raisins, which are chock full of yeast on their skin. There's more yeast than you can possibly want. Just a couple of those. And then also on the skin of orange, there's plenty of yeast ready to attack. And maybe some juice. Then you just stir in some oxygen for the yeast to multiply. You can do this for maybe 5 minutes. Best thing would be to shake it. And that's beer in 3 days, or a week. And you don't want to suffocate it, but you can maybe do like this for not, so fruit flies don't get into it. Like this, and then in a week you can drink it. It's going to taste like maybe a little sweet cider with some sourness and hints of orange and raisin. And then you can experiment as much as you want. So that's basically it, I guess.